Welcome, dear listener, to a tranquil expedition into the past. Tonight, we shall embark on a voyage with the Vikings, those legendary Norse seafarers whose long ships once dominated the seas of northern Europe and beyond. While tales of their daring raids and fierce warriors often fill the pages of history, our focus tonight will gently settle upon the less romanticized aspects of their adventurous lives, particularly the often grueling realities faced by those who ventured out into the unknown. Forget for a while the glory of conquest, and instead let your mind drift to the creaking timbers of a longship battling stormy seas, the biting chill of the northern winds, and the constant uncertainties that awaited these early explorers. Settle in, allow your thoughts to soften, and let us together uncover why a life of Viking exploration, though filled with adventure, was also fraught with considerable hardship. Imagine yourself aboard a Viking longship, the vessel that would be your home for weeks, perhaps months on end. These magnificent boats, though sleek and effective in the water, offered little in the way of personal comfort. Picture the tight confines below deck, or even simply on the open deck if the weather permitted. You would be crammed together with dozens of other men, your personal space reduced to a bare minimum. The constant proximity to your shipmates, with their varied habits and smells, would quickly become a defining feature of this maritime existence. Privacy would be non-existent. Every cough, every snore, every movement shared within the close confines of the vessel. This lack of personal space, day in and day out, would undoubtedly test the limits of even the most amicable of souls. The seas navigated by Viking explorers were often far from calm. Imagine the raw fury of a North Atlantic storm suddenly descending upon your longship. Towering waves, whipped up by gale-force winds, would crash over the deck, drenching everything and everyone in icy seawater. The vessel would be tossed about like a toy, creaking and groaning under the immense pressure. Maintaining control of the ship in such conditions demanded constant vigilance and immense physical effort from the crew, working together in a desperate struggle against the overwhelming power of nature. The fear of being swallowed by the unforgiving sea would have been a constant companion during such turbulent passages. The lands and waters explored by the Vikings often lay in the far north, where temperatures could plummet to well below freezing even during the summer months. Imagine the biting chill of the Arctic winds whipping across the open deck of your longship, penetrating your layers of basic woolen clothing. The cold would seep into your bones, making your fingers numb and your muscles stiff. Maintaining warmth and preventing frostbite would have been a constant challenge, especially during long voyages in northern waters. The discomfort of perpetually being cold and damp would have been a significant and often debilitating aspect of life as a Viking explorer. Beyond prolonged storms, Viking explorers also had to contend with sudden and unpredictable squalls that could arise with little warning. Imagine a seemingly calm sea suddenly turning into a maelstrom as dark clouds gather and unleash torrents of rain and violent winds. These sudden shifts in weather could be particularly dangerous for sailing vessels, threatening to capsize the ship or rip the sail. The constant awareness of the potential for these sudden and violent weather changes would have kept Viking explorers on edge, highlighting the lack of control they often had over their environment. Viking exploration was often intertwined with raiding and conflict. Imagine the apprehension as your longship approached an unfamiliar coastline, knowing that you might encounter hostile inhabitants. The threat of attack from local populations eager to defend their lands and possessions was a constant reality for Viking explorers. Landing on shore could quickly turn into a violent and desperate struggle for survival. The need to be constantly vigilant and ready to fight added another layer of stress and danger to the already challenging life of a Viking explorer. When encounters with hostile populations did occur, they were often brutal and unforgiving. Imagine yourself embroiled in hand-to-hand combat, the clash of steel, the cries of the wounded, and the ever-present threat of serious injury or death. Viking warfare was often characterized by its ferocity and close-quarters fighting. The experience of facing a determined enemy, the adrenaline, the fear, and the potential for loss would have been a terrifying reality for many Viking explorers who found themselves drawn into conflict. Maintaining adequate supplies of food and fresh water on long Viking voyages was a significant challenge. Imagine the limited storage space on board a longship and the difficulties of preserving provisions for extended periods. The diet would have been basic and often monotonous, perhaps consisting of dried fish, hard bread, and salted meats. Fresh water was a precious commodity, and supplies could quickly dwindle, leading to dehydration and illness. The constant awareness of the limited resources and the potential for hunger and thirst would have been a nagging worry for Viking explorers far from home. When venturing into uncharted waters, Viking explorers relied heavily on their knowledge of the stars and the position of the sun for navigation. Imagine trying to steer a longship across vast stretches of ocean using these celestial cues, particularly on cloudy nights or during periods of prolonged overcast weather. The risk of getting lost or blown off course was a constant threat. While the Vikings were skilled seafarers, their navigational methods were not always precise, adding an element of significant uncertainty to their voyages into the unknown. The close quarters and limited facilities on a Viking longship meant that sanitation was often rudimentary at best. Imagine the lack of proper waste disposal and the challenges of maintaining any semblance of hygiene during a long voyage. These unsanitary conditions would have created a breeding ground for illness and disease, which could quickly spread through the tightly packed crew, further adding to the hardships and dangers faced by Viking explorers. Venturing into uncharted waters also meant confronting the unknown, and for Viking explorers, this often involved the fear of mythical sea creatures believed to inhabit the vast oceans. Imagine the apprehension of sailing into areas where legends spoke of giant sea serpents capable of crushing ships, or colossal krakens that could drag vessels down to the depths. These deeply held beliefs would have added a psychological burden to the already challenging experience of exploring unfamiliar territories, fueling anxieties about the dangers that might lurk beneath the waves. While longships were equipped with sails, they also relied heavily on manpower for propulsion, especially when the winds were unfavorable or when navigating in calmer waters. Imagine the relentless physical exertion of rowing a heavy longship for hours on end. your muscles aching with the repetitive motion. This back-breaking labor would have been a common experience for Viking explorers, demanding significant strength and endurance from the crew. The constant need to row, often in challenging conditions, would have added to the overall fatigue and hardship of their voyages. When night fell, Viking explorers often had little choice but to sleep on the open deck of their longship, exposed to the elements. Imagine trying to find rest on the hard planks of the deck, with only a basic fur or woolen blanket for warmth and protection against the wind, rain, or cold. Sleep would have been fitful and often interrupted by the movement of the ship or the harsh conditions. This constant exposure to the elements would have taken a significant toll on their physical well-being, making it difficult to recover from the day's exertions. On long and arduous voyages, the risk of illness and injury was ever present. Imagine a crew member falling ill with a fever or suffering an injury during a storm or a skirmish. Medical care aboard a Viking longship would have been rudimentary at best, relying on basic remedies and the limited knowledge of the crew. Infections could quickly spread, and even minor injuries could become life-threatening in the harsh conditions. The lack of access to proper medical treatment was a significant danger faced by Viking explorers far from their homelands. Reaching land after a long sea voyage was not always a straightforward affair. Imagine the challenges of navigating shallow waters, rocky coastlines, or strong currents when attempting to bring your longship ashore. The risk of running aground, damaging the vessel, or even capsizing near the land was a real one. Finding a safe and suitable place to land, especially on unfamiliar or potentially hostile shores, added another layer of complexity and danger to the life of a Viking explorer. Viking society, including that aboard a longship, was often hierarchical. Imagine a clear distinction between the leaders or jarls and the common crew members. Obedience to the captain and the ship's leaders was paramount, and discipline could be harsh. Disputes among crew members, especially under the stressful conditions of a long voyage, could lead to conflict and even violence. The social dynamics aboard a Viking longship, while perhaps fostering camaraderie at times, also carried the potential for tension and strict adherence to authority. Life as a Viking explorer offered little in the way of personal comforts or possessions. Imagine the limited space available for personal belongings on a crowded longship. You would likely only have a few essential items, perhaps a knife, a small pouch for personal effects, and a worn cloak for warmth. Luxuries were virtually non-existent. This Spartan existence, far removed from the comforts of home, would have been another aspect of the hardship endured by those who ventured out on long voyages. Once a Viking longship sailed far from the coast, the sense of isolation would have been profound. Imagine being surrounded by the vast expanse of the ocean, with no other vessels in sight. Communication with the outside world would have been non-existent until the ship returned to port, which could be months or even years later. This feeling of being cut off from family, friends, and familiar surroundings would have been a significant psychological challenge for Viking explorers on extended voyages. Navigating at sea, even with the aid of stars and the sun, could be treacherous. Imagine a dense fog suddenly rolling in, enveloping your longship, and reducing visibility to near zero. In such conditions, it would be easy to lose your bearings, drift off course, or even collide with unseen rocks or other hazards. The fear of getting lost in the vast and disorienting sea would have been a real anxiety for Viking explorers facing poor visibility. The cumulative effect of the constant hardships, the cramped conditions, the harsh weather, the physical labor, the threat of danger, the limited food and water, and the psychological stress would have taken a significant toll on the bodies and minds of Viking explorers. Imagine the sheer exhaustion on finally returning to shore after a long and arduous voyage, your body aching, your spirit weary. The constant struggle for survival and the relentless challenges of exploration would have left their mark. Finally, imagine the emotional toll of being away from home for extended periods. Despite the allure of adventure and the potential for wealth and glory, the longing for familiar comforts, for loved ones left behind, would have been a constant undercurrent in the lives of Viking explorers. The uncertainties of their journeys, the dangers they faced, and the sheer distance from home would have undoubtedly weighed heavily on their hearts, reminding them of the sacrifices they made in their pursuit of exploration and adventure. Our focus now shifts to a specific Viking explorer, a man whose name resonates through history as the first European to set foot on the shores of North America. Leif Erikson. Imagine Leif, the son of the famed Norwegian outlaw Erik the Red, who had himself settled in Greenland. Leif was a man of his time, undoubtedly possessing the adventurous spirit and seafaring skills common among the Norse. Picture him growing up in the rugged and often unforgiving landscapes of Iceland and later Greenland, learning the ways of the sea and perhaps hearing tales of lands lying to the west, beyond the known horizons. These early influences would have shaped him into the explorer he was destined to become, a figure who would venture further west than any European before him. The seeds of Leif Erikson's voyage were likely sown by the accidental discovery of land to the west by another Norseman, Bjarni Herjolfsson. Imagine Bjarni sailing from Iceland to Greenland to visit his father. During his voyage, he and his crew were caught in a fierce storm and blown far off course. After many days at sea, when the weather finally cleared, they sighted land unlike any they had seen before, low-lying and wooded. However, Bjorni, focused on reaching Greenland, did not go ashore, but continued his journey. Upon reaching his destination, he recounted his sighting, sparking curiosity among the Norse settlers, including Leif Erikson. These tales of a new land to the west would have lingered in Leif's mind, planting the idea of a westward expedition. Intrigued by Bjorni's account, Leif Erikson resolved to explore these mysterious lands to the west. Imagine him in the Norse settlements of Greenland, gathering a crew of sturdy and experienced men, those with a similar thirst for adventure and a willingness to face the unknown perils of the North Atlantic. A sturdy longship would have been selected and provisioned for the long voyage ahead. Picture barrels of salted meat, dried fish, and casks of water being loaded aboard, along with essential tools and navigational aids. Leif, drawing upon the knowledge gleaned by Bjorni's sighting and his own seafaring experience, would have carefully planned his route and prepared his men for the challenges that lay ahead. There would have been a palpable sense of excitement and perhaps a touch of trepidation as they prepared to venture into the uncharted waters of the Western Ocean. Imagine Leif Erikson and his crew setting sail westward from Greenland, their longship cutting through the often turbulent waters of the North Atlantic. The voyage would have been long and demanding, lasting perhaps several weeks. Picture the vastness of the ocean surrounding them, day after day, with only the sky above and the endless horizon in all directions. They would have relied on their knowledge of winds and currents, as well as their rudimentary navigational skills, to guide them on their course. The constant motion of the ship, the spray of the sea, and the ever-present threat of storms would have been their constant companions during this arduous transatlantic crossing. The sheer scale of the journey underscores the determination and resilience of these early explorers. After their long voyage, the first land sighted by Leif Erikson and his crew was a stark and somewhat desolate place. Imagine them approaching a flat, rocky coastline, perhaps with glaciers in the distance. They named this land Helluland, meaning stone slab land, a description that aptly fits what is believed to be Baffin Island in present-day Canada. According to the sagas, they went ashore and found it to be a barren and uninviting place, with little to offer in terms of resources. Their initial encounter with the lands of North America was thus a somewhat underwhelming one, a reminder that the journey itself held more immediate challenges than the initial sighting of land. Undeterred by the starkness of Helluland, Leif Erikson and his crew continued their voyage south, following the coastline. After a further period of sailing, they came upon another land, one that appeared more promising. Imagine them sighting a low-lying coast that was heavily wooded. They named this land Markland, meaning woodland, a fitting description for what is thought to be the coast of Labrador in present-day Canada. The site of forests would have been significant, as timber was a valuable resource for the Norse. They likely went ashore briefly, exploring the terrain and perhaps gathering some wood before continuing their southward journey. This second encounter offered a more encouraging glimpse of the potential resources these western lands might hold. Continuing their southward exploration, Leif Erikson and his crew finally reached a land that truly captured their attention and held great promise. Imagine them arriving at a more inviting coastline, perhaps with green meadows stretching inland and a river flowing gently into the sea. It was here that they found an abundance of wild grapes growing, a resource that was particularly significant to the Norse who were familiar with wine. They named this land Vinland, meaning wineland, although some interpretations suggest the Vin could also refer to meadows or pasture land. The discovery of this seemingly fertile and resource-rich land would have filled the Viking explorers with excitement and a sense that their long journey had finally yielded a significant finding. Impressed by the abundance of resources in Vinland, Leif Erikson and his crew decided to establish a temporary settlement to explore the land further and gather provisions. Imagine them constructing simple wooden shelters, perhaps near a sheltered bay or the mouth of a river. This settlement, known as Leifsbudirs, Leif's booths, would have served as their base camp during their time in Vinland. They would have spent their days exploring the surrounding area, gathering grapes if that was indeed the resource they found, fishing in the rivers and the sea, and perhaps hunting for game. This initial settlement marked the first known European presence in North America, a temporary outpost in a new and unfamiliar world. During their time in Vinland, the Norse explorers inevitably encountered the native people who already inhabited these lands. The Norse sagas refer to them as skrælings, a term that likely encompassed various indigenous groups. Imagine the initial encounters between these two distinct cultures, a mix of curiosity, apprehension, and perhaps even misunderstanding. The sagas describe some instances of trade and exchange, but also hint at potential conflicts arising from differences in customs and perhaps competition for resources. These early interactions were a significant aspect of the Viking presence in North America, marking the first documented contact between Europeans and the indigenous populations of the New World. The Norse sagas emphasize the abundance of certain resources in Vinland, which likely played a significant role in their decision to explore and even attempt to settle there. Imagine the Viking explorers marveling at the profusion of wild grapes, perhaps seeing the potential for wine production, a beverage important in their culture. Timber, which was scarce in Greenland, was another valuable resource that Vinland seemed to offer in plenty. These resources, along with fish, game, and fertile land would have made Vinland an attractive prospect for further exploration and potential colonization, at least in the short term. Following Leif Eriksson's successful voyage, others were eager to explore Vinland further. Imagine Leif's brother, Thorvald Eriksson, leading his own expedition to the new land. His intentions were likely to chart the coastline more extensively and assess the long-term potential of the region. This second voyage indicates the continued interest and investment of the Greenland Norse in the lands to the west, suggesting that Leif's initial findings were indeed significant and worth pursuing. Thorvald Eriksson's exploration of Vinland, however, did not end peacefully. Imagine him and his crew encountering the Skrælings, but this time the interaction turned violent. The sagas recount a skirmish in which Thorvald was struck by an arrow and ultimately died from his wound. This tragic event highlights the potential dangers of encountering the indigenous populations and underscores the challenges that the Norse would face in attempting to establish a permanent presence in Vinland. Thorvald's death marked an early setback for the Viking ambitions in North America. The most significant Viking attempt to settle in Vinland was led by Thorfinn Karlsefni, who set out with a larger group of people, including his wife Gudrid. Imagine a fleet of Viking ships arriving on the shores of Vinland, carrying not just explorers, but also livestock and provisions for a more sustained stay. This expedition represented a more serious attempt at colonization, indicating the ongoing belief in the potential of this new land and a desire to establish a lasting Norse presence there. Thorfinn Karlsefni's expedition involved more prolonged and complex interactions with the Skrælings. Imagine periods of trade and exchange, where the two groups might have bartered goods. However, the sagas also recount escalating conflicts, likely arising from competition for resources or misunderstandings. Picture the Viking settlers building defensive structures to protect themselves from perceived threats. These sustained and often hostile encounters ultimately contributed to the challenges faced by the Norse in maintaining their settlement in Vinland. Despite their initial hopes and efforts, the Viking attempts to establish a permanent settlement in Vinland were ultimately unsuccessful. Imagine the settlers eventually deciding to leave, their longships setting sail eastward once again. The reasons for this abandonment were likely multifaceted. The ongoing conflicts with the Skrælings would have made life precarious. The challenges of maintaining supply lines across the vast Atlantic, coupled with the difficulties of adapting to a new and unfamiliar environment, would have also played a role. Ultimately, for reasons that remain somewhat debated by historians, the Norse chose to withdraw from Vinland, their presence there fading back into the mists of history for several centuries. While for a long time the stories of Leif Erikson and Vinland were primarily known through the Norse sagas, archaeological evidence has emerged in recent decades that lends credence to these accounts. Imagine the discovery of the site at L'Anse aux Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada, where the remains of Viking-style turf houses and artifacts, such as iron boat rivets, have been unearthed. This archaeological find provides tangible proof of a Norse presence in North America around the turn of the first millennium, aligning remarkably with the timeline suggested by the sagas and offering a concrete link to Leif Erikson's legendary voyage. Leif Erikson's voyage to North America, though not leading to a permanent colonization, remains a significant event in the history of exploration. Imagine the sheer audacity and skill required to navigate across the North Atlantic in open longships over 1,000 years ago. His journey predates Columbus's voyages by nearly 5 centuries, marking him as the first European known to have reached the shores of the New World. While the long-term impact of his discovery on European consciousness was limited at the time, his story stands as a testament to the Viking spirit of adventure and their remarkable seafaring capabilities. Consider the myriad challenges faced by Leif Erikson and his crew on their pioneering voyage. Imagine the dangers of navigating the unpredictable North Atlantic in relatively small vessels, relying on rudimentary tools and their knowledge of the natural world. They ventured into completely unknown territory, unsure of what they would find, both in terms of land and the people who might inhabit it. Their courage, resilience, and determination in the face of these uncertainties are truly remarkable and offer a glimpse into the spirit of exploration that drove the Vikings to venture beyond the familiar horizons. It is interesting to consider Leif Erikson's voyage in the context of later European explorations, such as those of Christopher Columbus. Imagine the differences in the ships used, with Columbus's larger caravels possessing different sailing characteristics and navigational technologies, while Columbus's voyages had a far greater and more lasting impact on world history. Leif Erikson's journey represents an earlier, independent European arrival in North America, a testament to the Viking Age spirit of exploration that preceded the more widely known Age of Discovery by centuries. In conclusion, the saga of Leif Erikson stands as a compelling tale of Viking adventure and discovery. Imagine him, the son of Eric the Red, driven by curiosity and the whispers of a new land, embarking on a voyage that would lead him and his crew to the shores of North America centuries before any other European. While their settlement in Vinland was ultimately short-lived, Leif Erikson's name remains etched in history as the first European to set foot on this continent, a pioneering figure whose journey beyond Vinland's shores continues to inspire awe and wonder at the daring spirit of exploration that characterized the Viking Age. Our journey into the world of Viking exploration now leads us to a more enigmatic and perhaps unsettling aspect of their culture, the legendary berserkers. Imagine these fearsome warriors, figures who stood apart even within the already formidable ranks of Viking society. They were known for their incredible strength, their seemingly unyielding ferocity in battle, and a mysterious state of frenzy that would grip them, transforming them into seemingly unstoppable forces on the battlefield. The very name berserker, often interpreted as bear shirt or bear shirt, hint at their unique character and the mystique surrounding them. They were figures who inspired both awe and fear, their legend woven into the fabric of Norse sagas and the annals of Viking history. The Norse sagas abound with vivid descriptions of berserkers in the throes of their battle fury. Imagine these warriors entering a trance-like state, their faces contorted with rage, their eyes rolling back in their heads. It was said that they would foam at the mouth, howl like wild animals, wolves or bears, and become seemingly impervious to pain, capable of withstanding wounds that would fell ordinary men. Their strength was legendary, wielding their axes and swords with terrifying speed and power, tearing through enemy ranks with reckless abandon. These accounts paint a picture of warriors who transcended the normal limits of human endurance and ferocity, becoming something akin to a force of nature unleashed upon their foes. One prominent theory attempting to unravel the mystery of the berserkers centers on psychological explanations. Imagine the intense stress and adrenaline of battle, coupled with potentially pre-existing personality traits that might predispose certain individuals to enter extreme emotional states. It's conceivable that these warriors, through a combination of psychological factors and perhaps even self-induced techniques, could enter an intense battle frenzy, characterized by a temporary loss of self-control, heightened aggression, and a diminished perception of pain and fatigue. This psychological state, fueled by the chaos and violence of warfare, could account for some of the seemingly superhuman feats and behaviors attributed to the berserkers in the sagas. Another fascinating theory suggests that the berserker phenomenon might have been linked to ritualistic practices and a belief in the ability to channel the spirit and power of animals, particularly the bear or the wolf. Imagine these warriors engaging in specific pre-battle rituals, perhaps involving chanting, dancing, or the wearing of animal pelts, bear skins for bear shirts, and wolf skins for similar warriors known as ulfhidnar, wolf coats. These rituals might have been intended to induce a state of altered consciousness, allowing the warrior to embody the ferocity and strength of these powerful predators on the battlefield, blurring the lines between human and animal. Berserkers were often associated with close-knit warrior bands known as félagi in Old Norse. Imagine these groups of warriors bound together by oaths of loyalty and a shared identity as fierce and perhaps somewhat unconventional fighters. The bonds within these félagi would have been strong, providing a sense of belonging and mutual support, particularly for individuals who might have been seen as somewhat outside the norms of regular Viking society due to their intense battle fury and unpredictable behavior. These warrior bands might have operated with a degree of autonomy, often serving as shock troops or elite units within larger Viking forces. A more controversial but still considered theory proposes that the berserker rage might have been induced by the consumption of hallucinogenic substances. Imagine certain plants or fungi known to have psychoactive properties being consumed by these warriors before battle. This could potentially explain the altered mental state, the perceived invulnerability to pain, and the extreme aggression associated with the berserker phenomenon. However, direct archaeological or textual evidence for this theory remains scarce, and it is difficult to definitively prove or disprove the use of such substances in inducing the berserker state. Regardless of the precise cause, the impact of a berserker on the battlefield must have been significant. Imagine the terror that the sight of one or more of these frenzied warriors could inspire in the enemy ranks. Their seemingly superhuman strength, their disregard for their own safety, and their sheer ferocity would have made them incredibly dangerous opponents, capable of breaking enemy formations and sowing chaos. The berserkers may have served not only as formidable fighters, but also as a form of psychological warfare, their reputation preceding them and instilling fear in the hearts of those who faced them. The societal status of berserkers within Viking communities appears to have been complex and perhaps somewhat ambiguous. Imagine them sometimes integrated into the normal fabric of Viking life, participating in feasts, gatherings, and even holding positions of power or influence. However, their unpredictable nature and their capacity for extreme violence might have also led to a degree of social separation or unease among their peers. They might have been seen as valuable assets in times of war, but potentially dangerous or unsettling figures in peacetime. Their integration into society likely varied depending on the individual berserker and the specific community. Over time, the phenomenon of the berserkers appears to have gradually declined and eventually faded from Norse society. Imagine this decline coinciding with significant cultural and religious shifts, such as the Christianization of Scandinavia. The intense trance-like state and the potential connections to pagan rituals might have become less accepted within the new Christian framework. Additionally, the consolidation of more centralized forms of power and the development of more disciplined military structures might have lessened the need for, or even frowned upon, the uncontrolled fury of the berserkers on the battlefield. The primary sources for our understanding of the berserkers are the Norse sagas, which were often written down centuries after the Viking Age. Imagine historians and archaeologists carefully studying these ancient texts, trying to discern the line between historical fact and literary embellishment. While the sagas provide vivid and compelling accounts, it is important to approach them with a degree of critical analysis, recognizing that they may have been influenced by folklore, oral tradition, and the desire to create heroic figures. The mystery of the berserkers continues to fascinate scholars, who strive to piece together the truth behind these legendary warriors from the often enigmatic clues left behind in the historical record. Delving deeper into the Norse sagas reveals specific instances and descriptions of berserkers that offer further clues to their nature. Imagine turning the pages of the saga of Egil Skallagrimsson, where characters exhibit berserker-like rage and strength, or exploring the Ynglinga saga, which mentions berserkers as part of Odin's retinue. These textual references, though sometimes fragmented and open to interpretation, provide valuable insights into how berserkers were perceived and portrayed within Norse society and their literature. By carefully analyzing these mentions within their specific narrative contexts, we can gain a richer understanding of the berserker phenomenon. The very definition of the berserk state remains a subject of ongoing debate among scholars. Imagine a spectrum of interpretations ranging from the idea of a purely psychological battle frenzy triggered by intense stress and adrenaline to more esoteric theories involving spiritual or shamanistic practices. Some researchers suggest that the berserker state might have involved a form of ritualized behavior aimed at achieving a temporary connection with animalistic power, while others emphasize the purely physiological and psychological aspects of extreme aggression and a temporary loss of self-control. The lack of definitive evidence leaves the precise nature of the berserk state shrouded in a degree of mystery. The phenomenon of warriors entering a state of intense battle fury is not unique to the Vikings. Imagine drawing comparisons between the berserkers and similar warrior traditions from other cultures around the world, such as certain Celtic warriors, or some Native American warrior societies known for their fierce combat prowess and trance-like states. These cross-cultural comparisons suggest that the berserker phenomenon, while distinct to the Viking context, may tap into more universal aspects of human behavior in warfare. It is also important to consider the role of folklore and storytelling in shaping the enduring image of the berserker. Imagine Viking bards reciting tales of heroic warriors who possessed almost superhuman strength and could fly into a rage that made them unstoppable. Over time, these stories, passed down through generations, may have embellished the reality, contributing to the larger-than-life image of the berserker that we find in the sagas. The desire to create compelling narratives of brave and fearsome warriors could have led to the exaggeration of their abilities and behaviors, further adding to the mystique surrounding them. While berserkers were undoubtedly valued for their prowess in battle, their intense and often uncontrolled fury might also have led to a degree of fear or suspicion within their own communities. Imagine a warrior known for their berserker rages being viewed with caution by their neighbors, perhaps seen as someone whose unpredictable nature could pose a threat even outside of combat. This potential for marginalization within their own society adds another layer of complexity to the understanding of the berserker's role and status in Viking culture. The very word berserker offers potential clues to the origins and understanding of these warriors. Imagine considering the linguistic roots of the term with its common interpretation, linking it to bear shirt, berserk. This connection strongly suggests the association of berserkers with the power and ferocity of the bear. It reinforces the theory that these warriors may have ritually identified with this animal, perhaps even wearing their pelts or believing they could channel its spirit in battle, further solidifying the link between the animalistic and the human in the berserker phenomenon. It is possible that the berserk state was not a monolithic phenomenon, but rather encompassed a spectrum of intensity and manifestation. Imagine some warriors entering a state of controlled battle fury, enhancing their strength and aggression, while still maintaining some tactical awareness. Others might have succumbed to a more complete and uncontrolled rage, becoming virtually crazy and heedless of their own safety. This potential for varying degrees of the berserker state could help to explain the diverse descriptions found in the sagas. While direct archaeological evidence specifically identifying a warrior as a berserker is challenging to find, some artifacts and burial practices might offer suggestive clues. Imagine finding weapons adorned with carvings of bears or wolves, or burial sites with unusual arrangements that might hint at specific warrior cults or rituals. While these findings are not definitive proof, they can contribute to our understanding of the warrior ethos of the Viking Age and potentially shed indirect light on the practices and beliefs associated with the berserkers. The mystery and power associated with the berserkers continue to captivate the popular imagination. Imagine their portrayal in modern literature, video games, and films, often depicted as incredibly strong, almost superhuman warriors who fly into uncontrollable rages. These modern interpretations, while sometimes exaggerating or romanticizing the historical accounts, demonstrate the enduring fascination with these enigmatic figures from the Viking Age and the power of their legend. In conclusion, The mystery of the berserkers remains one of the most intriguing aspects of Viking history and culture. Imagine these warriors, figures of immense strength and terrifying ferocity, who seemed to transcend the limits of ordinary human behavior on the battlefield. Whether their state was purely psychological, induced by ritual, influenced by substances, or a combination of these factors, the berserkers undoubtedly left a lasting impression on their contemporaries and continue to fascinate us today. Their legend, woven from historical accounts, folklore, and ongoing scholarly inquiry, serves as a powerful reminder of the complex and often enigmatic nature of the warrior ethos in the Viking Age. Having explored the thrilling yet perilous world of Viking explorers and the enigmatic nature of the berserkers, we now turn our attention to the heart of Viking society, the longhouse. Imagine this elongated dwelling, often built of timber or a combination of timber and turf, with a sturdy thatched roof providing shelter against the elements. This wasn't just a house, it was the central hub of family life, a place where generations lived, worked, and slept together, forming the bedrock of the Viking community. The longhouse was a testament to their resourcefulness and their strong familial bonds, a sanctuary against the often harsh realities of their world. Step inside a Viking longhouse and picture the scene. It was typically one large open space, often quite long, sometimes extending over 30 meters. A central long fire pit would run down the middle of the floor, providing warmth, light, and a place for cooking. Imagine the air filled with the gentle flicker of the flames and the faint scent of wood smoke. Along the sides of the longhouse, raised platforms or benches would serve as sleeping areas for the family members, perhaps with simple bedding made of animal hides. There might be designated areas for specific activities, such as a corner for weaving on a loom or a space for woodworking. Storage chests and shelves would hold precious belongings and tools. While perhaps appearing simple by modern standards, the longhouse was a functional and communal space designed to meet the basic needs of the entire family. Imagine the rhythm of daily life within the longhouse. The day would likely begin with the rising of the sun. The central fire would be rekindled and the work would commence. The women of the household would typically be responsible for preparing food, perhaps grinding grain, churning butter, or stewing meat or fish over the fire. Children would have their own set of chores, helping with tasks like fetching water, gathering firewood, or tending to smaller animals. The men of the household would often be engaged in tasks outside the longhouse, such as farming or fishing, but might also undertake repairs or craft work inside during inclement weather. There was a strong sense of shared responsibility and cooperation within the family unit, with each member contributing to the overall well-being of the household. Viking women played a crucial role in the functioning of the longhouse and the entire farmstead. Imagine them skillfully working at a warp-weighted loom, weaving cloth from wool that they had spun themselves. Spinning wool into thread was another constant task, ensuring a supply of material for clothing and other textiles. The responsibility for preparing and preserving food fell largely to the women, involving tasks that were often arduous and time-consuming. They also played a central role in raising and caring for young children, nurturing the next generation of Vikings. The contributions of women were essential to the survival and prosperity of the Viking household. Imagine the world of Viking children growing up within the longhouse. From a young age, they would have been integrated into the daily life of the family, learning essential skills through observation and participation. Older children would assist with more demanding tasks, gradually taking on responsibilities within the household and on the farm. They would learn crafts from their parents, boys perhaps learning woodworking or basic farming techniques from their fathers, and girls learning weaving, spinning, and cooking from their mothers. Storytelling around the fire in the evenings would have been a common form of entertainment and education, passing down the myths, legends, and histories of their people. Childhood in a Viking longhouse was a time of learning, growing, and preparing for the challenges of adult life. The men of the Viking household were typically responsible for the more physically demanding tasks outside the longhouse. Imagine them working in the fields, using simple plows pulled by oxen or horses to till the soil in preparation for planting. Tending to livestock, such as cattle, sheep, and pigs, was another crucial responsibility. Fishing in nearby lakes or fjords would have provided an important source of food. Men might also be skilled in crafts like blacksmithing or carpentry, creating and repairing tools and other essential items for the farmstead. Their labor was vital for providing food, resources, and security for the family. The self-sufficiency of the Viking household relied heavily on their ability to cultivate the land. Imagine the fields surrounding the longhouse, carefully prepared and planted with crops such as barley, which was a staple grain, and oats. They might also have cultivated vegetables like beans and root crops in smaller garden plots. While their farming techniques were relatively simple, they were adept at managing the land and utilizing the resources available to them. In some areas, they may have employed basic irrigation methods to ensure their crops received adequate water. The success of their harvest was crucial for their survival through the long winter months. Livestock played a vital role in the Viking economy and the sustenance of individual households. Imagine families tending to their cattle, which provided milk and meat. Sheep were particularly important for their wool, which was essential for clothing and textiles. Goats and pigs were also valuable sources of food. Chickens and other fowl would have provided eggs and meat as well. The care and management of these animals were integral to the daily life of a Viking farmstead, representing a significant form of wealth and a reliable source of essential resources. Viking life was characterized by a high degree of self-sufficiency, and various crafts were essential for creating tools, clothing, and other necessities. Imagine women skillfully weaving on their looms, transforming spun wool into fabric. Men would have been adept at woodworking, using axes, knives, and other tools to create everything from furniture to farm implements. Leatherworking was another important skill, used for making shoes, belts, and other essential items. These crafts were not just practical, but often also represented a form of artistic expression, with intricate carvings and decorative elements adorning many of their creations. Despite the hard work and challenges of daily life, the Viking longhouse was also a place of strong family bonds and communal living. Imagine the family gathering together around the central fire in the evenings, sharing a meal, telling stories, and reinforcing the ties that bound them together. These moments of togetherness would have provided comfort, support, and a sense of belonging in a world where survival often depended on the strength of the family unit. The shared experience of living and working together in the longhouse fostered a deep sense of interdependence and loyalty. While family was the fundamental unit of Viking society, there was also a broader social hierarchy. Imagine a system that included jarls or chieftains at the top, followed by free farmers, carls, who formed the backbone of society, and then thralls, who were slaves and occupied the lowest rung. This social structure influenced aspects of daily life, including legal rights and responsibilities. However, even within this hierarchy, the family unit remained central to identity and social standing. Kinship played an incredibly important role in Viking society. Imagine a complex web of interconnected families where loyalty to one's kin was paramount. Family ties dictated obligations of support, revenge, and social standing. Lineage and ancestry were highly valued, connecting individuals to the past and shaping their present status within the community. This strong emphasis on kinship provided a sense of security and social order in a society that sometimes lacked centralized authority. Viking communities had their own systems for maintaining order and resolving disputes. Imagine the gathering of free men at a thing, a traditional assembly held at regular intervals. Here, laws were recited, grievances were aired, and judgments were made by the assembled community or by designated law speakers. This system of customary law, passed down through generations, helped to regulate social interactions and provide a framework for justice within Viking society. The Thing was a vital institution that underscored the communal nature of their legal and social structures. Hospitality was a highly valued virtue in Viking society. Imagine travelers or guests being warmly welcomed into a longhouse, offered food, drink, and shelter. Generosity was considered a social obligation, and the exchange of hospitality played a crucial role in maintaining social bonds and facilitating trade and communication. Feasting was another important social activity, often held to celebrate important occasions or to foster alliances and strengthen community ties. These gatherings in the Longhouse provided opportunities for socializing, storytelling, and the sharing of culture. Imagine the clothing worn by Viking people, practical garments made from wool and linen, designed to withstand the often harsh climate. Men typically wore tunics and trousers, while women wore long dresses or undergarments with an overdress. Animal furs would have provided additional warmth in colder regions. Personal adornment was relatively simple, often consisting of functional items like brooches used to fasten clothing, or perhaps simple necklaces and bracelets made of silver or bronze. Their clothing reflected their connection to the natural world and the practical demands of their daily lives. Despite the hard work that characterized Viking life, there were also moments for leisure and entertainment. Imagine families gathering around the fire in the evenings, listening to the recitation of sagas and myths. Board games like Hnefatafl were popular pastimes, providing mental stimulation and social interaction. Wrestling and other forms of physical contests might have taken place during gatherings or festivals. These moments of respite and entertainment provided a welcome break from the demands of their daily routines. The religious beliefs and practices of the Vikings were interwoven into the fabric of their daily lives. Imagine small wooden idols representing their gods, placed in niches within the longhouse, or perhaps amulets worn for protection. Offerings might have been made to appease the spirits or seek their favor. While larger religious ceremonies often took place outdoors at sacred sites, the presence of these subtle reminders within the home indicates the importance of their faith in their everyday existence. The lives of Viking families were intimately connected to the cyclical rhythms of the seasons. Imagine the burst of activity in the spring as they prepared the fields for planting, followed by the hard work of tending the crops through the summer. The autumn harvest was a crucial time, ensuring enough food for the long winter months. Winter brought its own challenges, with shorter days and colder temperatures, requiring them to rely on their stored provisions and spend more time engaged in indoor crafts and activities. The changing seasons dictated the pace of their lives and underscored their deep connection to the natural world. Consider the remarkable resilience and self-sufficiency of a Viking family living in their longhouse. They were largely independent, relying on their own labor, skills, and the resources available in their environment to meet their needs. their ability to adapt to the challenges of their climate, and their resourcefulness in crafting tools, building shelter, and securing food were testaments to their strength and ingenuity. Life in a Viking longhouse, while demanding, fostered a strong sense of self-reliance and a deep connection to the land. In conclusion, imagine the Viking longhouse, a central point around which family life revolved. It was a place of hard work, shared responsibility, strong kinship bonds, and a deep connection to the land. From farming to crafting to the observance of traditions and the telling of stories, the longhouse was the stage upon which the drama of Viking daily life unfolded. While exploration and raiding might capture our imagination, it was within these sturdy dwellings that the foundations of Viking society were laid, demonstrating a surprisingly structured and communal way of life that sustained them through the ages. And so, dear listener, our exploration into the world of the Viking Age draws to a close. We have journeyed across treacherous seas with daring explorers, delved into the enigmatic frenzy of the berserkers, and now found ourselves within the heart of Viking family life in the Longhouse. It is a reminder that history encompasses not only grand adventures and legendary figures, but also the quiet rhythms of daily existence that shaped the lives of ordinary people. As you prepare for sleep, perhaps you can carry with you a sense of the resilience, the challenges, and the surprisingly structured nature of life in the Viking world. Sleep now, and may your dreams be filled with peaceful voyages across tranquil seas.